Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to be learning Bloc, especially Qubit for this counter app. Now this counter app is based on the official documentation of Bloc, where if you come, you see some tutorials first where it starts with a Flutter counter. Now, the finished version of this app will look something like this, where you have this center text that is being built with Bloc Listener, a block builder, and where you have these two floating action buttons to increase and decrease the number. So if I go ahead and increment it, you see I have a console.log where it says about the current state that was 0 and the next state which it appears now to be 1. Now the key concepts that we are going to be learning for this tutorial is block observer, block provider, block builder. And one more item is the use of barrel files. So with that, let's go back. And I already have created a blank project which I'm going to drag into my workspace now. Let it load. This is a simple Flutter create command where I've used Flutter create Flutter underscore counter. And the main.dart file is fully empty. I have done nothing. We are going to start from scratch together. Just in the pubspec.yaml, I have added block and Flutter block, both of which you could find from pub.dev, and both of these are up-to-date versions as of recording this video. And you can see the date is 11/15/2022. Now let's go back to main.dart and let's start. Firstly, we need our import material.dart, and like always we have our void main where we need the run app function to run const counter app. Now this counter app should be a stateless widget, so let's make one stateless widget and name it counter app, where we need to return a material app. Here I want to set the debug check mode banner to be false, and I also want to set a home, and the home should be counter page, counter view to be exact. Now this counter view does not exist, hence we are getting an error which will be gone soon after we create one. Now for this tutorial we will be following a feature driven approach where our feature is the main goal of this directory structure. So within the lib folder, let's make a new folder, call it counter, since the feature that we are going to we will be having in this app is a counter. So counter, and inside of which I'll make another folder, name it view, and view will be responsible for holding the screen that we see. Inside of which let's make a new file, counter underscore view.dart, and let's import material. Let's make a stateless widget, call it counter view, and for the return of the build method we want to return a scaffold. With that, let's make an app bar. Let's give it a title of a const text that should say counter, and we can already go back to main.dart and import this counter view so that we don't get an error anymore, and change the material app to have the const modifier. I already want to run it, so let's go ahead, click run. Now my machine is quite a bit old one, hence it's going to take a bit longer to load it up. You could skip the video until it comes to the screen. Great, so the app is now running. For the counter view, let's set up our UI first of all. Let's call this body parameter, where I want to set up a center widget with a child of text, and the text should now for now say 0, and I'll already give it a style of theme dot off context dot text theme dot headline 2. Save it to have this grayish colored larger text. And another thing, I will as well come down outside of this center widget, call my floating action button, and instead of passing one single floating action button, what I want to do is give it a column with children and give a floating action button here. Now the onPressed will be empty because we do not have any function to raise the number as of yet. I'll give it a key. Since we are going to be having two different floating action buttons, it's a good idea to use different keys to distinguish between themselves. So a key, and I'll name it counter qubit increment fab. Fab stands for floating action button, and give it a child of const icons.add. One more, so I'll just copy it, and I'll give a size box to put some space between both of them. So const sized box of height 10, and paste the first button again. So now if I save, I have an error because we have the same key twice. To distinguish between them, I'm just going to change this from increment to decrement. So two different keys for two different buttons, and you see both of the buttons are up ahead. To bring them down within the column widget, we need to set the main axis alignment to main axis alignment.end. So with that, our UI is fully ready. All we have to do now is to set up the qubit to separate the business logic of increasing this number from 0 to 1 or -1, right? Within this feature folder, this counter feature, let's right click and hit qubit, new qubit. And the qubit name should be counter. Now you see within this counter folder, we have a qubit folder and a view folder. Within this qubit folder, you have two auto-generated files, counterqubit.dart, counterstate.dart. This counterstate.dart is something that you do not have to worry about as of this moment. It's auto-generated as a helper file for counterqubit. And us, at this moment, we are going to be working with this counterqubit. I'll change this package meta to be package material.dart. Now, you see we have this class counterqubit, which is extending a qubit. What we have to do is write our increment and decrement logic here. So void increment with an arrow function. What it will do, it will emit a state, and the state will be state plus 1. And then we are going to have another one, void decrement, and what this function will do is it will emit a state that is -1 from the state that currently is. Then you see we have these two errors, +1, plus and minus, because it doesn't know what you need to do with the state, because we need to set the state as an integer. And now you see this is gone, and the super of this qubit is going to take an initial state, which we will set it to be 0. With that, our qubit creation is fully ready. All we have to do is now provide this qubit and consume this qubit within a block builder. Now, our qubit should be consumed here for this counter view where we have this text widget. So we can come to this text, click this bulb, and use this block builder. Now this block builder is going to be of type counter qubit, which is going to take states of type integer. And we also need to import this block builder. All we have to do is now, instead of using this hard-coded 0, we are going to use this $sign and use the state. Now we still have a error, because if you have used provider package before, you know you have to initialize the provider a widget above the widget that is consuming it, right? So since we are consuming the state here, we need to provide the state a widget above this widget. So let's go to this view. Let's make a new file, call it counter_page.dart, and here let's import material, give a stateless widget, call it counter page, and instead of this container within this build method, what we are going to return is we are going to be returning a block provider. Now this block provider is very similar to change notifier provider. What we're going to do is pass a context, but we do not need it, so we can just pass an underscore and give our counter qubit. And the child should be our counter view. So now this counter view is getting the provided block from a widget above, which is this counter page. So save it. And we also need to go to our main.dart, and here where we are setting the home to be counter view, this should be counter page. So save it. Maybe hot restart the app. And one more thing, you see both of these are plus. Need to go to the counter view, and this one should be icons.remove. So now plus to increase the number, and minus to decrease the number. Now you see our buttons are not working. This is because if we come to this counter view, we have these buttons, but the on pressed are set to empty. They're doing nothing. They have a empty function. Now to get over this, I want this arrow function where we say context.read. This should be of type counter qubit, where we access the increment function. And for the second one, we do the same, context.read, and read is of generic type. We need to set the type to counter qubit and access the decrement function there. So save this. And now if I click plus, you see it's going up, and if I click minus, it's going down. So with that, we have already covered two of the most important topics, that are block provider and block builder. And now we are going to have a look at block observer. Let's have a look again. For this text, we are using block builder, and here we are using block provider. Now it's time that we go for the block observer. Now, before we go to block observer, one thing that this official tutorial will suggest is to have our counter app in a separated widget. So what I'm going to do is comment it out, and now as you see we have an error. Within this lib folder, let's make a new file, call it app.dart, and let's make a, first of all, import material. Now let's create a class of counter app, same as what we have for the run app. And this counter app should extend material app. Let's create a key constructor for it. And for the material app, I also want to pass some arguments. So I have to call super. Super is the material apps constructor. And here I'll again set the debug check mode banner to be false. And the home should be const counter page. So with that, we can go back to main.dart and import it. And hot restart it. You will see our app runs exactly the same instead of having this stateless widget that you see. See, it's working. Alright, now let's have a look at the counter observer. Within this lib folder, let's make a new file, call it counter_observer.dart. And here, let's call our block observer. You see, if you write block observer, you get all of this. Now, block observer lets you invoke different methods and functions on different events. So if an event occurs, you can do something. If an error occurs, you can do something. If any change occurs, you can do something. And if a transition is happening, while the transition is happening, you could do something. We do not need this transition. We do not need this and this at this moment. All we need is this on change. So for on change, what we want to do is simply call print. And here with this $ parentheses, what we want to do is call this block dot runtime type, come out and call this $change. And one more thing, both of this block base and this change should be of type dynamic. This is not important to write, it's just what it says in the official documentation, hence I am putting it here. Now to use this block observer, all we need to do is come to this main.dart, and above this run function, run app function, we call block dot observer equals to, this thing here should have a name of counter observer. So copy it, come back here, counter observer, and that is it. So with that, now if we click plus, we actually need to restart the app. If you go ahead and restart the app, you will see with every plus and minus, your app will give you a debug console output of what the current state is and what the next state should be. Now, one more thing, the last feature, the barrel feature. You see, for this app, you only have one feature, this counter feature. But imagine you have an app where you have hundreds of features. And when you want to import files from different Dart files, you need to import them separately. So to counter this problem, what we do is make a barrel file. Within this view, let's make a new file, call it view.dart. And here I just want to export counter page, and again export counter view. Now we come to this counter folder and make a new file, counter.dart, and here I want to export from the qubits folder counter qubit, since we do not need the counter qubit state, and export view, and there view.dart. So with that, our barrel files are ready to be imported, and our app is fully ready with Qubit as a state management solution. Thank you.